Hi, today in the Microshop we're building scale model lumber for modeling the tiny woodshop on wheels, and man, that's a mouthful. Welcome to part 2 of the Tiny Woodshop series, where I'm going to be talking today about, well, showing you today how I made scale framing lumber so that I can mock up what could be my new woodshop on this 1/12 scale trailer that I used the X-Carve to build. Everything is going to be in 1/12 scale, which means that 1 inch on the model will equal 12 inches in real life, or 1 inch to 1 foot, basically. I like that scale because especially once the model's done, I'm going to be messing around with some miniature saws and things like that to see what kind of layout I can do with this trailer. And that 1 inch to 1 foot, it's easy for me to process in my brain. So being easy to visualize is nice, but I'll have to be honest, there's going to be a little bit of mathematics involved. When I build the miniature lumber, I need two sizes. I need 2x4s and I need 2x12s. The 2x4s are going to be used for the wall studs and trusses, because I'm going to use trusses, I think, when I actually build it, if I build it. And the 2x12s are going to be for the floor framing. Now that might seem like a little bit overkill, but if you take a look at the way I'm going to do the trailer deck sits like this. The wheel wells sit like this. There's my tires. And on most of these tiny houses are built short, but they're also built narrow because they're worried about road restrictions. I don't think I'm taking mine on the highway, but it would be nice really to be able to move it around, which is why I want it on wheels, because the spot that I'd like it to end up has a building that needs to be torn down before it can end up on that spot. So I'd like to build it before I end up tearing that building down. Now the problem is that when I put a floor in here, the last thing I want to do is put a floor in and have a bunch of boxes that I have to trip over or figure out how my machinery is going to go around. So if I use 2x12s, 2x12s are just high enough that it'll get me over top of the wheel wells, and I'm going to completely bury the wheel wells so that I won't have to worry about those boxes. And then I can have a 10-foot wide shop, which is exactly the same width as the one that I have, but it'll be 18 feet long instead of being 10 feet long. And that's what I'm sort of shooting for. Now, the problem with this is when you're making these, the nominal lumber size is not 2 foot by 12 foot. For a 2x4, it's actually 1.5 by 3.5. So I can't use 2x4 as my measurements when I'm trying to figure out the mini lumber. A 2x12 is actually also 1.5 by 11.25. I keep thinking 10.25, but it's not. By 11.25. Okay, now because my scale is 1 to 12, I just have to divide all these things by 12 in order to figure out how big to set my calipers when I'm actually milling this stuff on the bandsaw. Now the problem is that when it's in fraction form, it doesn't work so hot. So I'm going to call this 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. And this is that should be half, not 1/12. I have 1/12 on the brain. This is also 1.5, so I can use the same calculation instead of doing it twice, by 11.25. So there's basically only 3 measurements that I have to calculate. And what I have to do in order to do this is I have to divide each of these by 12, because I want to find out what it is in 1/12 scale. And then after punching it out on the calculator, 1.5 inches is 0.125 inches. So 1.5 inches in real life, 0.125 inches on the model. 3.5 divided by 12 gives me 0.2917 inches on the model. And 11 1/4 gives me 0.9375 inches on the model. Now, what the hell do you do with this? Well, it's actually fairly simple. You have to figure out how many 1/8 or 1/16 or whatever. So what I usually do is I multiply this by 8. And in the case of the 1 1/2 inch, that's pretty easy because that times 8 is 1. That tells me that I have to set my miniature lumber, my calipers to mill my miniature lumber to 1/8 of an inch to end up with 1 1/2 scaled down from real life. And a number like this, if 8 doesn't work, then in this case I found that this number was hard to deal with. So if you multiply it by 8 and you get a long decimal number here that isn't easy to round, then you multiply it by 16 and then you try multiplying it by 32. And in fact, I had to multiply that one by 32. And that gave me basically 9/32. Whoops. Why did I put 6 there? That gave me 9/32, but it was actually 9.18 something or other. I don't know. I'm just guessing at that. So I'm going to actually set that at 9/32 strong, which just means I'll set my calipers at 9/32, and then I'm just going to bump them out a little bit bigger. Not too much, just a little bit. And in fact, I set this at strong too. I actually lied on my 1 1/2 inch dimension, or my 1/8 in the model version, because I thought 1/8 might be a little skinny when I started milling it. So actually all my 1 1/2 inch measurements, or 1/8 on the model, actually ended up a little bit larger. And when I come down to this, I can multiply this one by 16. So it's basically, if I multiply it by 8s, it gives me the answer in 8s. If I multiply it by 32, it gives me my answer in 32nds. If I multiply it by 16, it gives me my answer in 16ths. So I need, for a 2x4, to make a strip of lumber that's at least 8 inches long, because 1 inch in the model equals 1 foot in real life. 8-inch stick equals an 8-foot stud in real life. So I'm going to mill on my 2x4s longer than 8 inches, but the dimensions of them, I need to set them to, instead of 1 1/2 by 3 1/2, on the model, they'll be 1/8 by 9/32. Why do I keep putting a 6 there? Why is that, Megan?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Not enough coffee this morning. Okay, and for my 2x12s, which are 1 1/2 by 11 1/4, my model version will be 1/8, I got that from here, by 15/16. Now when I cut this, I always cut the bigger dimension first. So what I'll do is I'll clean up the end on just a regular old piece of 2x4, and then I'm going to cut a strip that's 15/16 wide, and then I'll reset the bandsaw to 1/8 of an inch, and I'll strip it down into a little piece of lumber. It's actually pretty easy. It's the math part that well, obviously I make mistakes all over the place today, and that's what you don't want to have happen.
Yep.
Okay, here I got a piece of 2x4. I just cleaned up the one edge. That's going to be the tops of my 2x12s. And what I need to do is set my calipers at 15/16 of an inch, because that's what I calculated my scale height of my lumber to be. So 15/16 of an inch. Now what I need to do is set my fence on my bandsaw, and we'll cut the large dimension first. Too much sawdust. Right, Megan?
Right.
All right, so 15/16 of an inch from the inside of the fence to the near side tooth, and I'll probably rip off just a couple strips. I've cut this piece of wood, well, it's like that. It's about 16 inches long. So that means that in real life, these will represent 16-foot 2x12s. I'm going to cut the 12-inch portion first, and then I'll flip the cut off over, reset the fence to 1/8 of an inch, and rip out a whole bunch of little 2x12s. So here. Okay, reset the caliber to 1/8 of an inch and just a hair more. That's 11 1/4 inches, or scaled down to 15/16. And when I rip these off, I'm going to have a whole bunch of little 2x12s. I'm in the middle of making the little lumber, and this is why I'm looking at building a new shop. There's my bench. There's some mahogany that I've got waiting for my next project that I want to start today, but I've got nowhere else to put it. You can see I've got very little floor space. I've got the bandsaw out because I'm cutting the little lumber, and I don't really have anywhere else to put this, and I keep running into it. It's falling over and hitting me in the ankles, and I think I've finally made my decision today that my shop's going to be 12 feet wide instead of 10. I figured 12 by 18, that ought to work. So you probably saw at the beginning, at the opening of the video, I was getting prepared to make the little lumber, and I had my bandsaw running. And one of the problems, here, let me see if I can, that doesn't really help. One of the problems that I had is that I ran a lot of this little lumber through and never ever worried about that little slot there, because none of the lumber got caught up in it. All of a sudden, every piece I cut off is getting caught in that stupid little slot. So I've come up with another way of doing this, which I think is a lot safer. You'll see that I can take my fence and I can flop it over, and I can either have a fence that tall or a fence this tall. Well, I started out with this tall because then my blade guard didn't have to be this high off of the top of the bandsaw. But to do, well, you'll see in a second when I put the platform on there, in order to, the platform's thicker than what this short fence is, so I've had to use the tall fence, and because of that I've had to raise the blade guide up. So I have all this unexposed blade, which doesn't make me very comfortable, but I'm going to be using a different push stick to push it through, and hopefully it all works out. So give me a minute, I'll reset things and show you what the little platform looks like. So you can see that's what I have. I just have a piece of scrap plywood clamped onto the saw. There's a little, it's kind of like a zero clearance throat guard almost on a table saw. I've got a little sliver here, which that might break off at some point, and I guess then I'll just have to clean up that edge and start over. But I have a lot of plywood here to work with, and a nice push stick to keep my fingers from getting nailed. So I have here's a stack of 2x12 lumber. I've milled up 2x12 lumber, and this is perfectly to scale, the right thickness. it's the right width, and then each inch on one of these is 1 foot in real life. So I'll be able to scale model my potential wood shop on top of the trailer. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure I'm actually going to build it. That's why I'm going through all this trouble. And I thought it's kind of, you know, I looked up scale model lumber. There's not a lot of it on YouTube. Couldn't find a lot of it on the internet. So I was interested in it, and I thought, well, maybe you might be too. So even though this was kind of a short video, and there's making the scale lumber is more about the measurements than it is about the actual woodworking. There's not a lot of woodworking to it. It's mostly safety above all else. We stayed safe. We got our lumber. And stay tuned for part 3, where we actually build the scale model of the possible tiny wood shop on wheels on top of the trailer we made with the X-Carve. So have a pleasant day. If you like the video, please click the like thing below. If you'd like to see more of this content, please subscribe, and have a great day. On today, I'm wearing my Canadian hat, or at least I think it's Canadian. It's made in Winnipeg, so it must be Canadian.